Michael, thank you so much for taking the time today. I do appreciate it. I love hearing about your travel because you're always in a different spot. I think every single time we've chatted, you've been in a different location for these podcasts and webinars that we've done. And I just want to thank you so much for the flexibility. I know you're traveling now, but taking some time and just, talking to us about your experience in call center. And with that said, what I wanted to do, so I've been listening to a lot of Sean Ryan podcasts. And Sean Ryan's podcast, he always starts in his podcast with like an amazing intro for his guests. And I wanted to do the same thing here because I think this is like such an appreciative way to create a conversation and get to know someone. But yeah, and then once I kind of go through that, I would love to hear more about your story into the space and really understand what's driving you. So today's guest, and let me know if I butcher this. This is the first time I've done this, so let me know how it goes. Today's guest is the definition of modern sales operator, a software engineer turned powerhouse business leader who has gone from coding to closing. We're talking to Michael Francik, CEO of Keystone Interactive and co-founder of TruAlliant, a Philippines-based call center that scaled to over 2,000 employees and delivers world-class inbound and outbound lead generation and customer service for small and mid-sized businesses. Michael's journey started as a computer science degree from Western Illinois University. And since then, he's worn about every hat from SDR, project manager, to leading a software development team, and now is running a global BPO. With deep roots in data science, automation, and dialing strategy, Michael brings a data-driven edge to sales that helps brands maximize performance, minimize waste, and absolutely crush their pipeline goals. Michael, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself, right? So how did this start? Like you graduated college in 2014. What did you want to do with your career at that point?
Sure. So you hit it pretty well, except one piece of the sales side. I am not the best salesman in the world. So I also didn't graduate college. I was at Western Illinois for a couple years, but I liked school, but I liked also having fun at school. So it wasn't, I didn't focus like I should have. And I ended up moving to Florida. And I'd always liked technology. I've always been, although I didn't like school, I'm a good learner. I love to learn. I just like to learn at my own pace and discretion, I guess. And when I moved to Florida, I wasn't skilled enough to get a job as a programmer at that time, but I was teaching myself by developing games on a platform called Unity. So I built this little phone app game.
What was it called?
Icebreaker.
Okay.
And it was pretty cool. It had level designers where, the community could build levels and then implement it in the game. That way I don't have to build levels myself. It was a really cool platform. But at that time, since I couldn't get a real job programming, I worked at a call center. And, during lunch breaks, I remember I would sit there and I'd read and I'd pull on my computer and I'd code. I was like obsessed with it. I got fired from my first sales job because I wasn't particularly good at sales. And then my next job, my manager had saw potential in me, I guess, working out, trying to build this stuff at the office and studying all the time. And he promoted me to manage the technology. So that was kind of where everything started.
From a timeline perspective, is that American Health, was it Infinix Media? And then you jumped into Persist Communication?
So I was at America's Health Group. That's where I was promoted. I worked at a couple places before that, not worthy of putting on my LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But I was promoted at America's Health Group. And I remember I wasn't there all that long. So America's Health Group was under an umbrella of probably about 15, 20 companies at the time, all with a very similar model with a parent company above us. And I remember, probably to this day, the best manager I ever had was Adam, the person who promoted me here at America's Health Group. But I remember this time, since I'm a data-driven person and always have been, I remember seeing, since I have visibility to all these other offices, I remember seeing other companies selling leads or becoming a sale, submitting them as a sale when we had them marked as wrong number. And I came to the conclusion that, okay, these leads are shared to several people. Something must be happening where if we're marking it as wrong number, the recording clearly is a wrong number or disconnected number and other people are selling it. There's something going on where we're not getting through. And it was this big, huge ordeal where, I kept fighting for it. And we ran a test and like changed 1,000 wrong numbers into a working number. And all the salespeople were upset. They're dialing mostly wrong numbers. And then 2 sales came through. It's like, oh my God, this is my theory that, these are not actually wrong numbers and they did result in sales. And when that happened, that made a big difference for the umbrella as a whole. And that's where I got promoted to then Infinix. Infinix was the media company.
Can I ask you a question there? You don't mind if I interrupt with questions, do you?
No, of course not.
Okay. What do you mean by this? Like they're coming in as marked as wrong number. And then what is it? What was your theory on like, hey, if we change, what did you change? Like what did you actually do there?
So these 15, 20 companies were all kind of interconnected. And we knew that when a lead was coming into Infinix, and Infinix would then sell that lead to 3 other people under this organization. Okay. And it would be somewhat frequent, maybe a couple percentage of the time, I would see a lead come through as a sale from another location. But when I look in my system, is dispositioned by one of my agents as a wrong number. And it happened enough times where it's like, man, I know the agents are properly managed. They know how to disposition properly. We can validate with recordings that they are not true wrong numbers. So I knew there's something not adding up, right? And the only way, or the most brute force way, I guess, to test that theory would be, well, let's change all these wrong numbers to dialable status, force them back through the dialer and see if we make contact. Now, if we make contact at a reasonable percentage, there's something funny going on.
Yeah.
So then that's what we did. I mean, I remember the agents were really upset because most of them were wrong numbers, but then 2 sales came through. And that was kind of the telling moment of, oh my God, there's something here. And later come to find out that's very much how ringless voicemail works. Two different phone numbers call a single line, they tie up the line, they get a voicemail or a disconnected number. That's exactly what was happening. The leads would come in, they'd go to 3 offices would call it at the exact same time. We would get the wrong number, someone else gets contact, and we mark it as the wrong number, they mark it as a sale.
So what was the solution? Was it just recycling those leads through, or is it changing how your dialing strategy to change the cadence of calling out to that?
Proper recycle logic, I think, was the solution. I mean, the big thing that kind of did for my career path is that kind of excelled me to the next company and the next promotion. I think that probably very basic recycle logic, where if that occurs, just push it back through the system a couple minutes later. And, if you get a second wrong number, take it out completely. Some sort of logic like that. But, it was a fundamental flaw in the business model of this umbrella company that we were able to solve.
Got it. So with was it Infinix Media? So you were there for around a year or so, mm-hmm. And then you jumped over to Persist Communication. What inspired you to kind of take the leap over to Persist Communication? So
it's a good question, and I think back at the time, and I was fairly young. I was probably 22 or 23 years old. And at that time, my passion and why I was obsessed with trying to learn programming and always reading about anything, numbers or economics related or technology, deep down, I wanted to be a software engineer. That's what I thought my path in life was. I mean, I was in college studying engineering, had to take a computer science class, and it just made sense to me. It was very easy for me to learn. When I left college and moved to Florida to work at a call center, it's like, man, there's nothing too glamorous a lot of times about some call centers. And I wanted to be a software engineer. I got an offer in the legal industry to take a job building a dialer system that integrates into other case management softwares that the legal industry uses. And I saw that as an opportunity to go down the path that I believed I was supposed to go at that time. And in hindsight, I think it was a very risky thing to do. I was not equipped or qualified for that job that I took, but I took the leap, and really with the goal of following what I believe thought at that time my path was supposed to be.
I mean, it seemed like it worked out, no?
I learned a lot. I definitely learned a lot. I mean, after being at Persist, I ended up deviating back into the industry. So sure, I'm thankful that it went that route, but it worked and disconnected me from the industry long enough where then I could see from an outside perspective what the industry needed to then start TruAlliant.
Got it. And so if you want to pivot to TruAlliant, we can. The very next question I actually was going to ask is when did you realize that you needed to start your own thing? What was that light bulb moment or that switch that happened? It's I'm not going to be fulfilled working at these other companies. I need to start my own thing and do it the way that I want to do it.
So my early 20s was when I decided I want to start my own business. I took this job as an engineer. I was managing a group in India, designing this technology. And at the time of leaving in Phoenix, I thought that's what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And I get to this job and I have a boss. I don't have freedom. I make good money, but I was driven to make more. So I remembered from being in lead generation that outsourcing to the Philippines is a thing that happens in the industry. So I started seeking out companies similar to TruAlliant, BPO companies that offer staff out in the Philippines. And really with the goals of making more money is important, but I think the bigger thing is the freedom. I mean, as you mentioned at the start of this call, every webinar for the last few months, I'm in a different country. I mean, today I'm in Germany. A month ago, I was in Japan. And it's not vacation for me. I'm working on these trips, but I have the freedom. And as long as I have the discipline to continue, obviously building, that's critical. But the freedom, I think, was the biggest appealing thing to wanting to start my own business.
Let's talk about that. What was the stress level like?
I think a lot of people can relate to, sometimes you see people in business and it's how do these people run a business? It's kind of crazy. Some people who have successful businesses, it just doesn't seem they should. And I look back in hindsight in my early 20s, leaving a job that I didn't get a degree for, but got a professional level job and moved to the Philippines, which is a third world country, to start a call center. And I look in hindsight and it's man, if I was in the same position now, would I analyze the risk of making that jump and do it? Probably not. I think my risk assessment was probably not well thought out when I left the software job. At the time when I moved to the Philippines, I had several partners. For a period of time, I was working with this group and I thought I kind of understood how things work and I thought I understood the people I was working with. And the first company I moved out to the Philippines and started actually ended up failing. I had a few partners and one of them was stealing money and things like that. And my first company in the Philippines failed. I remember when I left my job, I had $10,000 saved up and I paid for my flight to the Philippines, which is 30 hours and a big jump. And so not much to be taking that kind of risk. And at the time the first company failed, I basically went through that little savings that I had. I had just enough money to go back to America and try to find another job, I guess, or continue trying to rebuild. And at that time, fortunately, we had a couple good clients and people trusted me and they were able to prepay for services and things like that. And from there, we started the new company. So stress level was as high as I think it could be.
Yeah. I can imagine. Are you able to talk more about the experience? What did you do in terms of forming connections, building capital or resources? How did you get all that started?
I mean, I was fortunate because through my previous jobs, I had built a pretty good network of people in the industry. And, sometimes I think I'm honest to a fault. I'm very transparent. I'm very honest and people know that about me. So when the first company went out of business, I still maintained and established those relationships. The company went out of business because of internal factors, which were a people problem. That can be solved when some people leave.
Gone. Yeah.
So, with the relationships that we had and transparency and trust and honesty, which I believe are the most important and critical things, especially in our industry when there's so much lack of that, we were able to get advances and eventually pay those debts back to build. I mean, I remember I can think back in the Philippines and I remember like sitting in like plastic chairs in a room with no air conditioning. It's just the nature of that country. Working out of what's called an internet cafe, where we're paying per computer per hour, like, 14 cents per seat. And, it was not the cleanest place, and working, 14, 16-hour days. You think of a BPO call center to be a simple thing to build. But at that time, when we were rebuilding from zero after the first companies failed, we had about 60 agents. So probably around 10 or 12 management staff. So 70 people. It's not nothing. It's quite complicated. So it was probably one of the most stressful times in my life. But again, the only way I think we made it is, one, the clients we had at that time, but the clients trusted us and believed in us because of the ethics our company was built on.
Yeah. And what year was that? When about did you guys do that?
That would have been 2014.
Okay. About 11 years ago. So first company fails, you start TruAlliant, Keystone. Tell a little bit about how Keystone TruAlliant is different from your previous company. Like, what is the mission? What are you guys trying to solve for? Like, how is this positioned for success versus the prior company outside of, there's obviously fraud, waste, abuse from your partners at that time. Don't need to go too much into that unless you want to. It's totally your call.
Sure. So Keystone came a little bit later. And I think, when I'm building my companies, what I try to focus on is, with TruAlliant, we have to have a wide range of clients, and we have a large client base. And being that we have a large client base, we're able to see and identify pain points that all of these clients have. So Keystone came out of necessity a couple years after TruAlliant was established. The TruAlliant is a high volume, large amount of people providing services to many clients. But the pain point as we grow is the clients don't have enough leads to call. And if there's not enough leads to call, then they can't hire staff. So solving that problem is to create a lead company, which is where Keystone came from. And that is the pain point of the clients. We already have the clients established. So if I can solve the lead problem, I already have clients because it's a shared client base. So, that's really how I look at, when we're to scale or produce additional revenue streams and things like that, is what is the pain point of the client base? Because then if I can solve that problem, I already have the clients. So to scale is very easy. That's kind of how we see it. And that's where Keystone and why Keystone was founded, with a couple other partners who also had the same.
When you kind of look at your experience with creating the various businesses that you've done, how did you go about getting your first customer? Like, what was that like?
I mean, when we first started TruAlliant, we had some established relationships already, just from myself being in the industry and having a network of people. Since every business that I've built has been in the, attached to call centers, whether it is, software to protect call centers, or it is a media company, call center services, I have a shared client base. So really, the company was built on a foundation of existing relationships. And then every subsequent company had a shared client base. So it's very easy to start to migrate services over to the new company. I myself am not a strong salesperson, but people trust me. I'm honest. And if I think something's not going to work, I'm transparent with them. If I have a project that is very early, that is in beta, I am honest about that. So sometimes being very transparent and honest might not allow for quick growth, which I did see with Keystone, because the large established relationships at TruAlliant and one of my partners knows everybody, has a very different perspective. So growth might be slower, but clients are there because of that trust, and the relationships already existed.
Yeah. And so you say that you're not a strong salesperson. Like, how do you define a strong salesperson? Like, in your perspective, like, who is like a strong salesperson?
I am to the numbers, sometimes to a fault. Closing percentages on the number of leads that you're receiving, how quickly you're able to convert them, how long those call durations are. I mean, for me, I am just numbers to the core, sometimes to a fault, because I just get so narrowed in on the numbers, where sometimes looking a bit broader is the answer.
That sounds more like an analyst than a salesperson. Like the stuff that you defined earlier, like trustworthiness, openness, the ability to say like, hey, it's not going to work. Right. To me, that's what actually like a good salesperson is, right? Because no one likes to be quote unquote sold to, right? They just want to create a relationship of like, do I trust this person to do a job, right?
The problem is, I'll tell some of the clients who I desperately need that this has a high probability of failure. You know, a good salesman might be transparent, but not that transparent, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you remember what's, in your career, do you remember like what was your best like sales call versus like one that you just completely shat the bed on?
I mean, fortunately, a large percentage of our clients come from like referrals. And just since we've become so large, we have a reputation and I can rely on the brand of my company. When that's the case, sales is quite easy. I mean, the service we provide. We have mastered that service. We have a high probability of success. We have high retention rates. Those sales are very easy.
Yeah.
But I mean, I remember early on in the company when we would, I remember the first time I sold a client that would amount to $1 million in revenue per year. I remember where I was. I remember everything about it. And I remember how absolutely nervous I was because most of the time I did shit the bed and I wasn't a strong salesman. But yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk about that? Like, what was that like? Because like, so the purpose of Closers Club is really to get into that type of conversation and like understand the whole sales process. Was that your biggest sale?
At that time, that was, yeah.
Like, what was it like when you did your first million? Were you like, fuck, this is amazing? Or are you like, it's only uphill from here? Like what? Like, tell me about that. And then 10 million and then 20, like, let's talk about the numbers and like, not just the numbers, like what was the feeling? Like, what was it feeling of like, wow, this is actually, we're doing something here.
Well, I mean, I look at the path that I took, right? I was working in call centers. I remember I was sitting there programming Icebreaker, this little game, and I just desperately wanted to be a software engineer. And I was a call center.
Hold on. Sorry. You're not trying to like plug Icebreakers, right? Are you still like monetizing Icebreakers for downloads?
Icebreaker doesn't exist. I couldn't do the graphics part of it. That was my problem. But the logic and how the system's built worked. So, but I look at that path and then, I think, okay, then I got promoted with being a college dropout. Then I got a software job. At that point in my mind, I made it. I was good. And then after a little while, it wasn't enough. So then, I start this company. My first company failed. I'm in the Philippines with no money. And yeah, I remember when we achieved that million mark and I absolutely thought I made it. I called my family.
Yeah. That was going to be my next question. I was going to wonder what your parents thought. Like they must be proud.
Yeah. My dad, up until like 4 years ago, kept asking if what I do is legal. It's like, he's worked at United Airlines for 37 years. Like his path to success is go to college, get a good job, work a long time and retire. My path was a little bit more volatile. So yeah, I mean, I called my family, called my grandfather. It was unbelievable. The first million was definitely more emotional because it's such a milestone. I mean, you think of like a millionaire. That's a big milestone. 10 and then 50 being the next big one, amounting to $1 million a week, doesn't feel as crazy because it's just.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's strange. It's like you look at the numbers like, oh my God, we did, 1.6 million this week. It's weird, but less emotional. The first million was the big one.
Yeah, totally. What's the goal? What's the goal to get to that 100 million milestone? I guess what is the plan to get to the million milestone?
There's a lot of paths we could take. I mean, maybe the goal is to get to that mark and I think Keystone will get there. It's just a matter of time. Money doesn't speed up the growth process. Time is the barrier. And with time, we will hit that number without a doubt. But again, it's a lot. It's to the numbers now. It's not that like emotional thing like it was when I hit the first million because like, oh, I made it, right? There's no more tipping point. It's just numbers.
Let's see what else. What else do we want to talk about with this? In previous discussions, you mentioned many outsourced call centers, they focus on the physical expansion, right? Where you believe revenue can be scaled through increasing efficiency. Can you elaborate on this strategy and how you see that like from the whole operations aspect of call center?
Yeah, there's been a big shift, I think, in the industry since I started. When I first started, people would buy cheaper leads and you just stack labor because conversion rates are so low. And what we did with Keystone, which is completely outside of industry standard, again, going back to these like transparency things and barriers to growth, because we try to do something very different. We focused on extremely high quality leads. Instead of, industry standard selling a lead 6, 7, 8 times, 3 of those 6, 7, 8 times were then shared underneath that from somebody who's route. We sold leads twice, and we sold leads more expensive than any U65 lead vendor that I know in the industry. But what that then allows for is when you're buying a $3 lead that converts, 1 out of 150 leads for a $450 CPA, converting out, I think that's 0.75%. If 1 out of 150 leads convert, and on average leads convert on, say, the 5th dial attempt, that means you're making 750 phone calls to produce a sale. Whereas you buy a lead for $30, a lead costs literally 10 times as much, but also converts at a $450 CPA. Now you're converting 1 out of 15 leads. And if on the average, say the 4th dial attempt, because these people aren't being hammered, that's 1 out of 60 phone calls. So now what that's allowing from the agency's perspective or the call center perspective, what that allows for is instead of having 25 sales agents who are averaging 1.5, 1.75 sales per day, you can have 10 people averaging 4 sales a day. Now you're able to hire much higher quality people because you can pay them more because they're getting a lot more production. And a larger company is harder to operate. It is, as you add staff, complexity increases. So being highly efficient like that allows you to have a smaller group of people, but can actually produce more production because you're efficient. You're not brute force trying to get people on the phone. You have strategy in getting people on the phone, which then increases conversion.
Totally. I love it. This is my last question for the session. If you had to look over the past 10 years, right? Like, so thinking about your career from both, the developer to even the business leader, right? The entrepreneur, like what advice would you give either the Mike back then, like from 10 years ago, or the future Mike? Like what advice would you give that individual that's looking to essentially like, hey, how can I grow a call center? How can I develop my career within this space, knowing that, it's not necessarily like a linear growth trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on it. If my brain now was in me 10 years ago, would I have followed that same path? Probably not. I think as my companies have grown, I become a lot more conservative because I have to analyze risk at our scale. Mistake that changes your margin by 1% becomes a massive number because of sheer scale. So what I did to get to this point, I don't think there's really a whole lot I would change because I was given the opportunity to learn from these jobs that I took and also get a vast understanding of technology, especially taking underqualified and taking a software engineering job. I learned a massive amount from working at that company and dealing with the lawyers I was dealing with and things like that.
What would you say is like the most fundamental thing that you've learned over your career, right? From like going through this path?
Capitalizing on the honesty and the transparency, especially in our business, but just in general in life. Being a good person with good intentions might not be the quickest route to success, but it does have longevity. I mean, there's a reason that, I always find it funny when people ask me, are you still in the outsourcing business? It's like, of course I'm in the outsourcing business. Why would I not be? Me being not in it would imply either I left or I failed. And it just seems so foreign to me. So capitalizing on the honesty and the core values that I have, not just in business, but as a person as well.
That's great, man. Michael, man, I appreciate the time today. I hope you enjoy Munich. Is there
Thank
any
you.
other spots that you're traveling to on your way?
So I think tomorrow we're going to, I think it's called Strasbourg, which is on the
Okay.
border of France and Germany. Going to stay in France for a little while, then live in the UK for a month, and then to Turkey for a period of time, and then back home. So
That's
quite a
great.
journey.
That sounds a lot of fun.